Hello. We have been discussing about the early Greek philosophers, and today we go ahead with yet another early Greek philosopher entitled as Epicurus. This is Dr. Ananya Barua, Associate Professor in the Department of Philosophy, Hindu College. Epicurus was not literally a student of Democritus as mostly misunderstood. First disclaimer, in the sense of a direct teacher-pupil relationship. However, they did live about a century apart. But he was very much a philosophical heir to Democritus's atomism, while also reshaping it in ways that took it far beyond physics into ethics and the art of living. Democritus, if we remember, he belonged to the 460 to 370 BCE. He has been the founder of ancient atomism, where for him reality consists of indivisible atoms moving in the void with no teleology or divine intervention. Epicurus, on the other hand, lived sometime between 341 to 270 BCE, and he revived and adapted Democritus's atomism to answer not just what the world is made of, but also how we should live. Epicurus learned Democritian physics mainly through intermediaries like nociphans, but was critical of some purely deterministic elements. So the question is, what did Epicurus take from Democritus? Atom plus void ontology. So this atom plus void ontology is that reality is made of indivisible atoms moving in empty space. Materialism, on the other hand, states that no immaterial supernatural stuff is needed to explain the world. Naturalistic explanations further explains that phenomena are to be explained without invoking God's interference. So the further question then is, what Epicurus changed or added beyond atomism? Let's see the ethics as the goal. Democritus's atomism was primarily cosmological. Epicurus was therapeutic. Physics should free us from superstition and fear of that, clearing the way for ataraxia, which is the tranquil mind, and aponia, which is the absence of bodily pain. For Epicurus, the purpose of understanding atoms was not curiosity alone, it was to live well. Now, Democritus's atoms fell through the void in strict determinism. Epicurus introduced a random slight deviation in their paths, the swerve, S-W-E-R-V-E, the swerve, or also called as the clinamen, to allow for free will and moral responsibility. Democritus seems to have been more openly non-theistic about gods and cultural constructs. Epicurus, on the other hand, admitted gods, that they exist, but live in a perfect detachment, not meddling with the world, a move to counter charges of impiety. From epistemology, Epicurus emphasized sensations as the criterion of truth. All perceptions are true in themselves. Error comes from judgment. This empirical stance helped ground his ethics in lived experience. Now, if we look at the PPT here, Epicurus's philosophy beyond physics, we see that in the area of ethics, the contribution beyond Democritus is that happiness for Epicurus as pleasure in the absence of pain, friendship as central to good life. Psychology is that mind and soul are material but mortal, no afterlife, that is, no fear of divine punishment. Politics is the withdrawal from public ambition, which is life unnoticed. Unlike Democritus's occasional civic optimism, and the therapy has been the fourfold remedy, which is don't fear gods, don't fear that, what is good is easy to get, what is terrible is easy to endure. So Epicurus took Democritus's physics and made it serve ethics. Where Democritus mapped the mechanics of the cosmos, Epicurus used that map to chart a path to peace and mind, introducing free will, practicing guidance for life, and a therapeutic dimension that took atomism far beyond material science. Now, if we are to connect the Epicurus's philosophy beyond physics from the PPT, here we would see that the aspect of physics or cosmology. For Democritus, it was a universe made of indivisible atoms moving in void, strict determinism. For Epicurus, it was the same atom void theory but added swerve to allow non-deterministic events. For thus, Epicurus' move beyond atomism can be seen when he introduced the element of chance to safeguard free will and moral agency. The purpose of physics for Democritus has been primarily explanation to understand nature's structure. For Epicurus, it has been therapeutic to remove fear of gods and death, paving the way for tranquility. For Epicurus' move beyond atomism, physics becomes a tool for ethics, not just natural science. For theology, Democritus was possibly atheistic, gods as mental constructs or cultural products. For Epicureans, gods exist but are blissful, distant and non-interfering. Thus, the move we see, it had softened a theological stance to avoid impiety charges while maintaining naturalism. About ethics, Democritus advocated cheerfulness or euthymia, but no systematic hedonism. For Epicurus, pleasure is the highest good. It focuses on ataraxia, which is a peace of mind, and aponia, which is the absence of pain. So the move has been, it linked a natural philosophy directly to a practical art of living. About psychology, Democritus says that soul is material, it is dispersed at death, and there is no afterlife. For Epicurus, it is same but actively used to dispel fear of punishment after death, and it turned a scientific claim into a moral cure for anxiety. For epistemology, for Democritus, sensory perception is the basis of knowledge but not fully systematized. For Epicurus, all sensations are true in themselves, error comes from judgment. And for Epicurus's move beyond atomism, it built a consistent empirical method to guide life decisions. Now, about politics and social life, for Democritus, it is about civic-minded, valued moderation and justice. For Epicurus, it preferred withdrawal from politics, valued friendship as the highest social bond, and Epicurus' move beyond atomism is to shift from civic virtue to personal community for happiness. So we see that Epicurus is almost like a practical engineer of Democritus's blueprints, keeping the structure of atomism but designing it to improve human well-being rather than just explain the cosmos. So Democritus, as we have understood, has been the reason for foundational atomism to have developed, with atom plus void, which he had mentioned as eternal indestructible units moving mechanically. The reason why determinism crops up, where he talks about no randomness theory. Further, he did talk about soul is material, mortal, and ethics has been euthymia, which has been cheerful tranquility through understanding nature. And Epicurus inherits physics and modifies the purpose. On the other hand, Epicurus, for him, atomism is a therapy. It is just not a mechanistic way of foundational atomism. He keeps atoms plus void and adds material, soul and naturalistic explanations. He adds the term swerve, which is, it breaks the strict determinism and allows free will. He reframes physics, knowledge of nature, and removes fear of gods and death. We also see that for the ethics focus, for Epicurus, the highest good is pleasure, which is absence of pain and disturbance. Ataraxia, which is mental peace, plus aponia, bodily ease. He talks about friendship as chief good, and he also talks about withdrawal from politics. And about theology, Epicurus says that gods exist, but they are non-interfering and they are blissful, immortal, detached beings. That is, they are not really bothered about what we humans do in this world. They are busy in their world up there. However, he does agree that gods exist, but they are not in any way involved in our worldly matters. So we see that Epicurus inherits Democritus's philosophy, but he kind of polishes it, and Eucrates inherits and poetically further amplifies Epicurus's philosophy. So Eucrates again has been a poetic missionary of Epicureanism, where he had written about the de reram natura, or on the nature of things. And Eucrates uses Epicurus' system to combat superstition and promote a fearless life. He blends natural science, ethics and poetry for Roman audience. Now, at this juncture, we should be having this question, which is how Epicureans or Epicurus turns physics, which is atoms plus void, into a practical cure for the central human ills, fear, anxiety and bad choices. Let us explore. Now, the big picture for Epicurus has been the therapeutic goal. For Epicurus, philosophy is not an abstract ornament. It is, the point is to remove the mental and bodily disturbances that make life miserable. Physics or atomism is a means to the end. By explaining the world naturally, it dissolves the fear that troubles us, which is the fear of gods, fear of death, fear of random catastrophe, and so on. And it clears the ground for a tranquil life, which is ataraxia, and freedom from bodily pain, aponia. The metaphysical toolkit that makes therapy possible, he says, is atoms plus void, which is everything. So everything, be it bodies, mind, sensations, is composed of atoms moving in the void. There is no supernatural machinery that intervenes in nature. Mortal soul, he says that the soul is material and perishes with the body, and there is no conscious afterlife to fear. About the swerve, he says that it is a tiny indeterminate deviation in atomic motion Epicurus adopts from earlier atomists to allow for more moral responsibility and not strict determination. These metaphysical claims undercut the two biggest sources of existential terror, which is punitive gods and eternal punishment. So epistemology then, as a practical test about sensations and truths, Epicurus treats sensations as the starting point and criterion of truth. Our sense impressions are reliable data. Error arises from mistaken judgments about them. This gives a simple therapeutic method to correct false judgments by comparing them to clear facts about nature. Now, the ethics about pleasure redefined as freedom from disturbance, we see that pleasure is the highest good, but not hedonism as the beginning. Epicurus distinguishes between kinetic pleasures, which are active pleasures arising from actions like eating or intimacy, static pleasures, which is the state of absence of pain and disturbance like the preferred Epicurean, and ataraxia, which is the tranquility of the mind, freedom from anxiety, aponia, which is the freedom from bodily pain. The therapeutic aim is to maximize stable long-term tranquility, which often means moderating or foregoing immediate kinetic pleasures to secure greater static pleasures. The tetrapharmakos, or the four-part cure of Epicurus, is extremely famous, and a mention of it is important here. Epicurus famously summed his therapeutic program in 4 remedies, famously called as the tetrapharmakos. Tetra is 4, pharmakos or pharmacy is medicinal. So the 4 medicines. First is, don't fear the gods. If gods exist, they are blissful and uninterested in human affairs. Don't fear death. That is the cessation of sensation, nothing to experience, nothing to fear. What is good is easy to get, which is basic necessary needs are modest and attainable. What is terrible is easy to endure. Severe suffering is usually short or manageable. Each line is a short, actionable cognitive prescription that targets a common source of anxiety. Now about the practical or the therapeutic method, the diagnosis or correction is equivalent to habit. Epicurus' therapy works like this. First, diagnose the disturbance, which is identify the fear, the judgment, or what is it that is causing anxiety. For example, the fear of divine wrath or the dread of future pain. Then he says, explain it away with natural knowledge. That is, show how atoms, mortality of the soul and the nature of the gods remove the justification of the fear. Then he says, prescribe lifestyle adjustments, which is reduce unnecessary desires, cultivate simple satisfactions, prefer stable pleasures like friendships, moderate food, intellectual conversations. And then he says, rehearse and habituate, which means repeated philosophical reflection, example, meditating on mortality, practicing prudent choice, builds habits that maintain ataraxia. So he says certain concrete examples like fear of death. Epicurus argues that when you are, death is not. When that is, you are not. So that cannot be an evil for the one who would experience it. Making this judgment repeatedly removes paralyzing anxiety about dying. Fear of gods, he says, explaining gods as non-interfering beings or products of imagination removes the rationale for ritual-driven fear. Desire management, he talks about it as classify desires, necessary and natural, which is food, shelter, unnecessary but natural, luxury foods, vain or empty like fame, wealth. So he says therapy aims to eliminate vain desires and satisfy necessary ones in a measured way. He then talks about friendship, community and the garden. Epicurus did not prescribe solitary asceticism. He placed friendship at the core of a good life. Friends provide security, shared pleasure and mutual counsel. His school, which is the garden, functioned as a community where philosophical therapy was practiced together. The social network is thus itself therapeutic. It reduces fear and provides a stable context for pleasure. About free will or the clinic of the Swerve, he says, the Swerve, S-W-E-R-V-E, is philosophically subtle. Swerve, S-W-E-R-V-E, it introduces a small indeterminacy into atomic motion. So human action is not simply the predicable product of prior atoms. Scholars debate whether Epicurus meant this literally or as a theoretical device. Functionally, it supports the therapeutic aim by preserving moral responsibility and agency. You can be held to choices and trained in right judgment. Techniques and practices, the day-to-day clinic, philosophical conversation to refute false beliefs, reflective exercises like contemplating death to diffuse catastrophic imaginings, simplicity regime, which is reduce wants, cultivate self-sufficiency, prudent calculus, which is evaluate choices by long-term net pleasure, which is endure short pain for greater future ease, rituals reframed, that is, if any ritual remains, it is for calming purposes, not fear of divine retribution. Further, the objections, limits and Epicurus replies about hedonism encourages excess. Epicurus replies that true pleasure is to secure tranquility. Excess often harms that end, so prudence and self-control are central. Naturalism undermines morality, where Epicureans maintain social rules and justice are instrumentally valuable. Justice secures mutual benefit and peace. scientific objections, where atomism is ancient physics, its empirical correctness is historical question. The therapeutic structure does not hinge on every atomistic detail, but on the broader naturalistic diagnosis that removes superstition. And about the legacy and the modern parallel, we see that Epicurus' therapeutic model influenced Lucretius, the poetic propagation, and later secular moral philosophy. A helpful modern analogy, not identical, is cognitive therapy. Identifying false or irrational beliefs, examining the evidence, and replacing harmful judgments with corrective beliefs that reduce anxiety and change behavior. So we see that Epicurus turns atomism into a hands-on therapy. Metaphysics provides the diagnosis, that is, there is no punishing gods. That is nothing. The world runs on natural law. Epistemology provides the diagnostic instrument, that is sensation with correct judgments, and ethics provides the cure, which is prudent pursuit of stable pleasure, friendship, and simple living. So philosophy becomes a medicine of the soul, which is practical, communal, and designed to produce lasting tranquility. Thus, Epicurus is rightly the practical engineer of Democritus's blueprints. For Democritus's role, which has been the architect of the design, it is Epicurus who took it to a different perspective altogether. And if we are to look at the PPT here, we see that Epicurus' role, blueprint element from Democritus, the deterministic atomic motion, Epicurus re-engineered it by adding a swerve, and the purpose was to make space of free will or moral responsibility and personal agency. Blueprint element from Democritus was deterministic atomism. For the blueprint from the Democritus, we see the material soul, and Epicurus added or emphasized mortality of the soul to dispel fear of afterlife. The purpose was to remove anxiety about eternal punishment, and the blueprint is definitely the material soul. The blueprint element from Democritus was of the naturalistic gods, where Epicurus recast gods as blissful and non-interfering, thus neutralizing fear of divine wrath without denying their existence outright, which led to naturalistic gods, if any. About the natural law explanation, it led to applied human psychology and desires, thus helping identify and limit unnecessary desires, thus leading to natural law explanation. Cheerfulness to understanding nature, Epicurus re-engineered it by making it systematic ataraxia, which is peace of mind, plus aponia, which has been freedom from bodily pain as the final goal, thus turning a vague ethical idea into a clear life strategy, which led to cheerfulness through understanding nature. So we see that Democritus had given a cosmic floor plan. Epicurus fitted it out for habitation. He installed fear removal systems where there is no fear of gods, no fear of death. He added desire regulation devices where he categorized desires into natural and necessary, natural but unnecessary and vain, and fulfill only the first reliably. He built social safety features, friendship as an emotional anchor. He designed mental climate control, that is the tetrapharmakos, as a toolkit to maintain psychological tranquility. Thus, we see that Epicurus takes the abstract principles of Democritus and makes it usable, human-centered systems, and Epicurus did exactly this. He converted natural philosophy into a therapeutic technology, a kind of soul engineering. The device he produced was not just a doctrine but a lifestyle, which was the garden. Daily philosophical reflection and structure, desire management. Thus, the end result has been that Democritus's here's how the cosmos works became as Epicurus, given that this is how the cosmos works. So here's how you can live without fear, with stable pleasure and in harmony with nature. So Epicurus did not discard the Democritian or the Democritus's framework. He redefined it into a personal survival and flourishing kit. Thus, Epicurus turned physical theory, which was atoms plus void, into an integrated practical system that ties metaphysics, epistemology, therapy ethics, social practice. That move is his cultural intersectional innovation, each piece supporting the others. So, philosophy functions as a medicine for life. Thus, whether it is naturalism as therapeutic foundation, or it is sensation-centered epistemology as a clinical method, or the swerve of where the metaphysics for agency was included, or hedonism revisited into prudential therapeutic hedonism, or virtue instrumentalized, or justice as convention or slash mutual advantage, or friendship and communal therapy through the garden as clinic, to the therapeutic pedagogy of philosophy as discipline practice, to reframing theology and to neutralize fear, and an early cognitive model which has been the precursor to therapeutic cognition has been seen and felt, and thus Epicurus is rare in ancient thought for fusing metaphysics, epistemology, ethics and social practice into a unified practicable system aimed at human well-being, and that makes his philosophy unusually action guiding. And however, the weakness is that the therapeutic package leans on atomism and the swerve. A historical or empirical rejection of those claims does not collapse the ethical core, but it does remove some of the justificatory rhetoric Epicurus uses to dismantle religious fear. And also some bit of ambiguity over agency, where the swerve attempts to reconcile freedom with naturalism but opens hard questions like, is freedom meaningful if grounded in randomness? So modern compatibilist frameworks are probably more satisfying. Nevertheless, even if science moved on from ancient atomism, the therapeutic architecture, correcting false beliefs, minimizing unnecessary desires, emphasizing social support, remain strikingly relevant. And thus, this is why Epicurus continues to be one of the major contribution beyond atomism in Greek philosophy, and he will be remembered in times to come. Thank you so much.